Y'all know what it is.
Hey guys, Happy New Year and welcome back to another exciting episode of Eggs Classics. I hope you had an amazing holiday, and as we ramp back up for 2022, we're looking forward to returning with new programming in the coming weeks as Mike's BootCamp draws to a close. We greatly appreciate everyone who has stuck with us these last several weeks, and I hope you've enjoyed the programming. Hopefully you've been exposed to some great ideas from our most popular guests from the early days, and today will be no exception. Today's guest is Kathy Bowman Atkins, the founder and CEO of the Lattitude Group. Kathy helps CEOs and business leaders set the course for their businesses. Combined with her unique talent for asking tough questions, her no-nonsense approach gets to the heart of the matter quickly and helps business owners breathe new life into their companies. At the Lattitude Group, she combines her corporate and consulting expertise to deliver sound advice, concrete plans and processes, and sometimes a little tough love, which allows her team to deliver real-world experience, recognize key pain points, and partner with business leaders to keep a steady eye on results. She joins the show today from all the way back in episode number 171 from August 27th, 2020, to discuss what to do when you believe your company is doing great and you don't need any planning, the questions you need to ask yourself about your business, authenticity at work, and so much more. Please join us in welcoming to the show founder and CEO of the Lattitude Group, Kathy Bowman Atkins. Hey Kathy, how are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
So good, and grateful to have you here. Thanks so much for doing it.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for making the time. Really appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
why don't we get this going and just tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you got to where you're at now.
What time do we have?
Right?
I'll keep it short. I actually grew up in a rural farming community in North Carolina.
What part?
Right, in the Triad, if you know anything about that. That's kind of the foothills, Greensboro.
My dad's from
Salem.
New Bern. He grew up working in the tobacco fields.
That's what I did.
Well, there you go.
So there you go. So did that. Great folks and all of that. No one ever went to college. I had a fifth grade teacher that said you should go to college. So I told my mother that, and she said okay. So we worked really hard to do that. I was fortunate enough to get a job in what was the Bell system. Most of your listeners are probably too young to understand the magnitude of that. When I came up through the Bell system, it was at the top of the heap. That was the heyday of being in corporate America. You had the best development training opportunities. We led the quality movement in the United States.
Is the Bell system tied to the telephone communications? Is that what that was?
Bell system was AT&T, Western Electric, and all of the Bell telephone companies all in one big company.
Okay.
And then that all got blown apart in the 80s, late 80s, and then in the early 90s, some of it came back together. But at any rate, we had the best of everything. So I got great experience there. That really prepared me. Then I moved on and ended my corporate career with General Dynamics. As Ryan mentioned, my parents fell ill, and I was traveling 80% of the time all over the world. That didn't work so well. So I left, spent 10 months just taking care of them in that situation, and did not need to go back on the road. My dad then was left. My mom had passed away, and he needed me there. So decided to start my own business. A colleague of mine who had been in corporate America. So we were, we were talking, and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. We were very analytical, and we did all of this, big analytical, and all these analysis and spreadsheets and, this, that, and the other, and assessments. And one day we just kind of looked at each other and said, okay, what did we do well? Why did we succeed in corporate America? And it was pretty simple. We were really good at setting a vision. We were really good at inspiring people to that vision. And we were really great at looking at people and seeing the potential in them that they couldn't even see in themselves and helping them to realize it. I mean, that was it. And so we said, okay, so we started this business, and that's what we do. And that's what we've been doing ever since. He left the business. He retired. He's much older than I am. He retired a couple of years ago, and the business has thrived. And we really work, in two areas. We work in this area of strategy, helping, privately held companies develop their strategic business plans and execute them, which is a huge part of that. And we help them with the development of their people, so that, for their people to develop themselves personally and professionally. So that's what we did, and that's how we got here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much for all that. That's a awesome background and fun to hear about, just the bell system and all that stuff. It's times have changed a little bit.
Yes, indeed.
So let's talk a little bit about one thing that you sort of talked about in your introduction there. This idea of recognizing potential and in small businesses, especially for a lot of companies, they might kind of look at strategic planning as for, the big guys or whatever. And I think especially for young entrepreneurs, it often gets overlooked. It's this idea of, jump in with both feet and we'll figure out the plan later. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of, I guess the importance of strategic planning and the role that it plays in developing a small business, but also how we might recognize in our own business that we need this.
Great question. I would say a couple of things. For entrepreneurs, people that are just starting out, a business, I don't think that, it's been my experience, that they need to tackle this great, huge, humongous strategic planning process. That's not what a new entrepreneur starting a new business needs. You need a business plan. You need a pragmatic plan that sets out a financial roadmap for the next year. And maps out the things that you have to do to get that business off the ground, to get it running. So that's really about basic, fundamental, sort of blocking and tackling kind of things for a small business that they need to do. It doesn't need to be some huge thing with a ton of goals and action plans and all of that for new business, right? But there does need to be a roadmap. And so, that's what we help people do. From there, what my company really focuses on, yes, it is small businesses, but it's established businesses that have a goal, privately held. Usually we're talking, $25 to $200 million, which those are still small businesses, of course, as you know, Brian.
That's small?
And so,
what?
Yeah, that's small. That's small. And we have a light versions for smaller ones, but, that's what you're doing. But how do they know that they need that? Here's the thing. There's not a business in this world that doesn't need that. I'm just going to tell you that right up, because, people say, well, things are going great. So, everything's going great. And I say to these people, then to what end? If they're going great, what are you doing to leverage that? What are you doing to make sure that momentum keeps going, to put the things in place that you need to leverage that to its greatest end? And how are you going to know, what you need to do with that, right? Okay, it's going great. So what are the triggers that tell me when things may not be going to be going so great, so that I can see those ahead of time, in those kind of things. It's great if it's going great, but you still may be sub-optimizing. So people need a plan to do that. Again, it doesn't have to be, this big convoluted thing. We do not hand people a big book to put on the shelf that says, here's your business plan. They have their plan. If they want it on a piece of paper, we can give it to them on one piece of paper, but most everything now is done online. We have a portal, they have a project management tool, whatever goals and action plans they have are in there. They can update them in real time. We have monthly business reviews. We have signal lights that says red, yellow, or green, tells them how they're doing against it. So it's just a really easy process. There's not any big books or anything like that.
So you're looking for a more established business that's, got X amount of income coming in. When they come to you, what's your first step? What do you analyze with them to put a plan together?
Well, before we start putting a plan together, that is a great question, Mike. Thank you for asking it, because it's different than what most people think. Our process is not about that. The first thing we want to know is, for the business owner or the business leader, whoever's in charge and responsible, what do you want this business to be? What do you want to get out of this business? You got to have that commitment first to know where they want it. It's their business. They put in the equity or the sweat equity. So you got to figure out what they want to get out of this. They have to have a commitment to it. So that's the first step. Once we figure that out, and the second thing is, what are you willing or not willing to do to get there? In other words, what are your values? There's some things that, we could do to get there, but we're not going to do it because it violates what we think is important, what our values are. So we don't spend any time sitting around, contemplating your navel or wordsmithing values. We have a way to get there that's pretty simple and easy. but also authentic and down to earth. And so we get those set. And so then the second thing we ask those business owners or leaders is, okay, how committed are you to this process? Because if internally you're not committed to be the leader and to hold people accountable and help people understand that this is a part of your job and that this is important, that it's not just some other theme or project initiative, flavor of the month that we're doing over here and your real job is over here. If you don't have that, we have great processes and tools. We know how to facilitate this. We know how to help you put together a plan. But if you don't have that, you're going to sub-optimize at best. So are you willing to make that commitment to really be the leader internally to drive that plan? And then the third thing we want to know before we'll even talk about starting a strategic planning process is, excuse me, is are you willing to commit to at least a year? In other words, once we develop that plan, we're going to move into execution mode. A lot of people develop plans, put them on the shelves or stick them now, obviously, in that portal over there that they never go look at again. But we're working on the execution. We're there with them because the minute the ink dries on that proverbial plan, things start changing. You're never executing at the end of the year that plan that we developed in month one. But you've got a roadmap to be changing those things. So we're looking for that kind of commitment. And then before we start, we tour facilities if they have multiple facilities or a location, whatever it may be, and we interview people across the business. Business leaders, no matter how open they are, how welcoming they are, how open their door is for employees to come in, employees down in the organization know things that they don't. And we need to know that to help them to develop that right plan. So all of that takes place before we come in and start saying, okay, fill out these templates, tell us this about your markets and your products, your services, your competition, all of that kind of stuff. And we start whittling down to the plan.
Yeah, I like that. I'm listening to a book right now called Start With Why.
I know that book.
Yeah, I think he uses a case study with United Airlines where a CEO was horrible. He had the whole top floor locked off and the huge security guards, only people with certain access could get up to the top and talk to him. And then the new CEO came in and made it employees first. And then he'd actually go down and throw bags with the baggage handlers to actually hear what's going on and get them working. And he totally redid the whole business by having that mindset. So I like that you go and you actually interview the lowest on the rung and then work your way up and figure everything out. So it makes complete sense.
Yeah, there are a couple of things you mentioned there that I'd like to unpack. I mean, one thing in particular is this idea of just this roadmap we were talking about. And as you were describing, you're doing all these steps so that you can get people on the road. But the comment that I liked that you made was this idea that at the end of the year, we're not executing on the same plan we made at the beginning. What I think that illustrates that's really strong is this fluidity. I think so many people get caught up in their strategic planning almost as the excuse to not move forward. Because the plan changes day to day. So how could we ever write a plan? How could you ever do that? And so they either just don't do it or they use it as an excuse for not doing something else. And so I really like that point you made. And I was just thinking about sort of the roadmap as an analogy in that the roads and the different paths and stuff, those might be predetermined. So maybe those are our goals, right? We're trying to achieve goals. Right. But then the hazards that come up along the way, the tree that blew over or the flash flood somewhere or whatever you're encountering, those things aren't on the map, right? That's so right. Even though we figured out a map, we still have to adapt and we have to figure out how to get around these hazards as we're going. And I think that that's a really smart way of thinking about, this planning in general. But then also I wanted to sort of branch into a discussion on goal setting a little bit and helping people uncover what it is they actually need. I think so much of developing the strategy is understanding what you want, where are you going, and to stick with our roadmap, to which location are you heading? And so I wondered for people who, I think especially in the entrepreneurial community, there are a lot of folks who get started in business because they have a passion or they have a product or they have a whatever. And, the rest is kind of, we assume it will fall into place, but we're really, focused on the one thing that we do or the one thing that we know. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about how you help guide your clients or potential clients through this like goal setting step or helping them better understand who they are and what they want, sort of back to that first step in your strategy plan.
Well, we ask them, we look at them and ask them things like, if you look at your life, depending on the age of them, quite frankly, we might say, if you look at your life 20 years from now, where do you want to be? What are the things you want to have accomplished? And, we hear all kinds of things, right? Obviously, send your kids to college, have a retirement home, have a home at the beach or in the mountains or in Hawaii, or I want to be able to sell my business at a great profit or turn it over to my kids, all different kind of things, travel the world, you name it. Okay. So what do you want in 10 years? What do you need in 10 years? Okay, that's maybe a different, place. Kids may be in high school, we got to be, paying for all of those, prom dresses and cars and all of those kind of things and blah, 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 and going away to school. So that's, we talk about that. It gets personal. What do you want out of this business? And then talk about what's your passion and getting there. What do you want to, accomplish? What do you want to give back, or what's important to you? What do you enjoy? What drives your passion? So that helps to kind of formulate, where they want to be. And then you back up from there and say, okay, where are we now? Okay, this is where we are now. And we start taking some assessments. So we find out where they are now, right? And you want to go, this is where you want to be out there, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, because we want to know what the long haul is. But then what we do is we say, okay, what are the necessary and sufficient things that have to occur in the next year that have to happen? And we drive that down to 8 or less goals. Now, that may not sound like a lot for a company, and, companies that we're talking about at whatever size. If it's if it's an entrepreneurial company, I think it's 2, 3, 4 goals, all right? Because then you're going to take those goals and we do that through a process of, okay, we have all these things, and now we go through a process of people going through and saying, but if you could only have 2 of those, what are the 2 that absolutely have to be done this year? Okay, and we go through a process, and they do some pre-work. So we don't come in there with a blank piece of paper. They've already thought through markets. They've already thought through products and services. They've already thought through internal processes, opportunities, all of those kind of things. We have all kinds of things. And so we go each one as a module, and we start with, a bunch of stuff, and we whittle it down through a process, what's really important. Get it to the critical 3, 2 or 3, and then we go through what we call, believe it or not, a walk of fame at the end. And so they've got all this up there and say, you can only have 7 or 8 goals. And we start whittling it down. And one of the ways you do that, okay, if you could only accomplish one thing, and that's all you have the resources to do in the coming year, you have to let everything else go. What would it be out of this list? All right, that makes it. Now, if you can have everything on the list but one thing, which one would you let go? We're dropping that off till we get it to that short list. And then from there, they have to develop action plans. So if we're going to say that this is so important that we have to accomplish this, it's necessary, but it's sufficient for this year, who does what by when? And they break it down into that plan that occurs over the next year. So that's how we get them to the process. So we're starting with a whole bunch of information. They do pre-work, we whittle it down. We have modules and ways that we go about doing that. We put a little technology in there for fun. There's a thing called a Mentimeter where everybody votes right now, and it pops up, they see it, around the room on a screen at one time. And so we have people moving around. So it keeps them engaged, keeps them stimulated.
I like that you brought up the action plan. I don't know the exact quote, but it's something like a goal without action is just a dream, or
exactly.
Something to that effect. You can write down your list of 100 things you want to accomplish, but if you don't take the first step to do it, you're not going to make the first step and get that yacht, get that retirement home on Hawaii, wherever you want to be.
Right.
It's just a matter of doing the work that needs to go into it. How do you go about getting the employees and the people who aren't necessarily going to get the retirement home in Hawaii out of these goals on board to the process? Is there any motivation involved with them?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And that's absolutely critical. So that leadership is part of it. So a couple of things happens. We like for them, once we do like an owners or leaders session up front to determine that front end part that I talked about, Mike. Mm-hmm. But then we move into, and we ask them to establish a strategic planning team. And so a strategic planning team can include people from across the business and different organizations and levels. Now, initially in the early stages, that can't be too big because it's a new process and people are getting assimilated to it, etc. So you're talking 7 or 8 people at best. So there's only so many people that you can tap into. But once that plan is put together, okay, then there needs to be a communication plan across the business, okay, that gets rolled out. And then each organization needs to look at that and say, each leader in that organization, and sit down with their employees and say, okay, if this is what the company's doing, this is what we need to be doing, this is what you need to be doing, so that it ties it all together. And, you know, the way that we do that with employees, what good leaders and managers do, you got to figure out and help the employees figure out what's in it for them. I want to roll out a new program that's really great for the company to employees. If I start out by telling them why it's so great for the company and me and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to lose them pretty quickly. But if I start out telling them why it's important to them, how it can help them authentically, you know, honestly. And then if they look at me and say, well, it's not going to hurt you too much either. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's good for me too. It's good for the company. But you got to get them to buy in, and then you have to be honest and follow through with that. And the way you do that is if you can find out what's important to your employees, why are they working? And you connect the dots to what's important to them. If they help you as an organization get what you want, okay, that you will prosper and that you will be honest breakers and give back to them to help them accomplish what they want. It's what we call the contribution cycle. As an employee, if I bring my best to work every day to help you accomplish that, and if we do and we prosper, we give back to you to help you accomplish your personal goals. That's the connection that has to be made. So it starts at the top of that strategic plan. You're rolling it down through the organization, and you're helping people to understand what their role in that is and what it means to them.
Yeah. That same book, Start With Why, he, in that same scenario, the United Airlines, I think is what it was. The CEO actually, they wanted to get their turnaround quicker so that they could, you know, get a plane in, landed, and taken off quicker. And they needed their employees to be on board with it. And so they created a bonus program that's directly tied to that in particular. And I think they said something like the bonus program was costing like $2.5 million per month in payroll to be able to do it. But in the turnaround time, if they had X amount of time, you know, if it took 40 minutes instead of 30 minutes to get the plane around, they were losing $5 million. So it was incentive to pay the $2.5 million was nothing compared to the $5 or $6 million that they were going to lose by not doing. And he actually made that check. He wouldn't include it in their paycheck. He sent it out specifically on its own, separate, so they knew that this is why they were getting it.
Exactly.
And I just thought that fit in well with what you were saying. So
yeah, that's awesome. So moving forward and sort of actually circling back a little bit. So we've spent a lot of time discussing this, and I actually like that you brought in the rest of the company in that last little bit there, because to this point, we've sort of been talking from the leader's perspective and trying to understand the needs of the leader. But, you know, for a lot of people, you know, and as we discussed, a lot of people come to entrepreneurship with a business idea or a product or a service or something that they like to do. And, you know, it's easy to, you know, get real close to our own ideas and not really see the forest from the trees. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you know, first, how do I even know that I need help? Like, what are there some signs I should be looking out for? Or, you know, what sorts of indicators might I find in my business that sort of indicate that we're off track or that we need help?
Well, I mean, there's obvious ones, and then there are less obvious ones, or that we don't. I mean, the obvious ones, obviously, is that we're not getting the results that we want. You know, we're not making the money that we want, having cash flow issues, right? Paying our bills, those kind of things. Those are pretty obvious ones, right? So that's there. But the other ones are if you're always frustrated. If you as an entrepreneur are always frustrated that things aren't getting done, they aren't getting done right, okay? That things are always lagging behind. I know that this needs to be done and that needs to be done and blah, 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 blah. And you're always running around like a chicken with your head cut off, you know, trying to figure out how to get all that done. That is a sure sign. And one of the things that entrepreneurs in particular, right, a mistake that they make, and it's because of their passion a lot of times, okay, is they have this passion, and they also, most entrepreneurs have a dream about taking that and growing it, making it, big and wonderful and having a great impact, right? Because they're passionate about it. But what they don't understand is oftentimes they're holding on to everything, and the only way you can scale any business is to let go, okay? And to find ways to let other people do things, right? So there's an acronym that we use called CSEDT, which we encourage people who have a problem, holding on to things, etc. They want to scale their business, and it's, can't somebody else do this? Because if someone else can do it, they should be doing it, and finding ways to do that and to make it work, is really, really important. So if you're just frustrated all the time, and another thing, if you're always saying nobody else can do anything right, I have to do everything myself, that's a telltale sign, okay? And if that's your philosophy and that's what you're going to cling to, you're never going to grow that business, and you're never going to stop being frustrated.
Yeah, no, I think that makes an awful lot of sense. And so, I mean, I guess the flip side of that coin then is there some, I guess, what are the good guys doing, or what are the successful companies doing that maybe I could look at as a business owner, or, maybe even running a larger company if I'm, analyzing my competition or something? Are there things that I could look out for in a competitor, or in, maybe just another company I like, that would be sort of indications that they're doing things the right way, that, these are the things that I should be aspiring for?
Well, if you're talking about looking from the outside at someone else's performance, the greatest way to really gauge that is what kind of customer satisfaction or customer loyalty they're getting. That's where it's always going to show up, okay? Or if it's a business where employees face the public in some way, where your employees, if your employees, how your employees seem. If I walk into a place that I'm thinking about doing business with and having a relationship with, and the employees are all disgruntled and unhappy and grousing, that's not a good sign. That's probably not the business that I want to be associated with, because there are problems there, right? But if I can go into a place where people seem proud to be working there, they take pride in it, right? And they take pride in their interacting with you, giving it their best, etc. And I hear people talk about them being a good company, that's a pretty good sign that they're doing something right. So then you start asking questions, and more often than not, they have some kind of plan or focus. They know the key things they need to be focused on, and one of those is the best interest of their employees. I don't care what company it is, the best and most critical asset you have are your employees. They go home at night and you want them to come back the next day as their best selves. Okay, so that's really important, and most of them have to have some kind of values and culture that they live authentically, and have some focus. And so that can be a big plan, a little plan, whatever plan it is, but it has to be effective, and they have to be executing on it.
Okay. Good. Yeah, no, I like that too. And you touched on a term, you've mentioned it actually a couple times throughout, which I love, but it's this idea of authenticity. And yes. I think that, obviously it takes a lot of work to be authentic. I think a lot of people don't think it does. Like they just sort of think, if I'm just, kind of the same crappy human I am all the time, I'm being authentic, right. I mean, you may not like it, but I'm being authentic. Right. I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of authenticity as it applies to work, but also as a general ethos, because I think there's so much around this, and I see a lot of companies, especially, at least for a brief period, I work in and around marketing and advertising, and in my field, it's really common for, even smaller agencies, as well as the big ones, to sort of, they buy the ping pong table, or they get the fridge, or they start buying lunch or whatever, right? But so much of it is kind of keeping up with the Joneses. Like this has become expectation. All the agencies are doing this. And it's not really coming from a place where, as you mentioned, keeping the employee's best interest in mind. Really it's more about putting on a face, right? Or sort of looking like we're being true to our ethos. And so I wondered if you'd just talk a little bit about sort of authenticity as it's a factor, not only in your business, but how maybe you draw it out of people that you're working with.
You made a great point in framing that question. Authenticity is not just about being whatever you are and regurgitating whatever comes to mind all the time. That's not. Authenticity is about genuinely seeking all the time to be a better leader, be a better person, uh, gaining understanding of things that impact you and the people around you in your business. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's easy. I mean, look at what's going on in our world right now. I don't know, we're not trying to get into all of that, but in terms of the social unrest and the racial injustice and all that kind of thing, it's easy for people to say, well, I didn't experience that, or that never happened to me, or I wasn't here or there, when that happened. But if we want to be authentic, we think about it deeper than that. Okay. But so why is that other person saying that? It may not be my experience, but it's their experience. And it's not all about me. It's about other people. Again, I'm not trying to make some, but that's true everywhere, right?
Yeah. And so there's this really famous marketer. Most people know him, this guy, Seth Godin.
Oh, yeah.
And, he's got a million books out there and everything. But I really liked his take on authenticity. He says basically authenticity for me is doing what you promise, not being who you are. Exactly. So it doesn't have anything to do with these superficial thoughts about, me being me and I'm allowed to just be me, even if it's at your expense. But it has more to do with sort of this, another word for it might be integrity, right? It's this, understanding that we do what we say we do, and we do that, and that is what makes us authentic. And so I think that that's a really great thing, and a big part of business, of course, maybe more so now than ever.
But you also have to have the initial core values and your mission statement and everything up front, so you don't get in a position where you're promising something that you don't want to promise.
Yeah, that's need so true.
Have that kind of line drawn in the sand beforehand, so you don't go against your core values.
So. Yeah, it's true.
Well, and that's another place where authenticity comes in. See, I think authenticity is really important in terms of really effective leadership. So I think people need to think long and hard about their values, and that's a short list. There are very few things that are absolutely unequivocal or black and white. So that's a short list, and you need to think carefully about that. Then I'm saying that I'm always going to abide by that, but we're all human beings. So everybody's going to stub their toe every once in a while, right? And make a mistake. The thing is, if you're authentic enough to say, yeah, I did stub my toe, I was wrong about that, you called me out, thank you for that. And I get that we're not just willy-nilly going around thumbing our nose at those values. We try authentically to live them every day, but when we screw up, we authentically own that and move forward. So yeah. I think that's the difference.
Actually, on your website, you mentioned 360 influencing skills and accountability. I kind of think that might be in the same mindset. Can you break that down a little more for us? What that is, the 360 part?
Yeah. So for example, when you set values in an organization, what you really should be saying as an organization is that those values are for everybody, and those values are for everybody to hold everybody else accountable and call them out. So if I work for you and you're my boss, but you do something that violates that, you've given me permission, or you should have given me permission. I should do it in a way that keeps you whole and in a good way, not put you in jail, but I should be able to call you out on that in a productive way. Say, hey, Mike, maybe you didn't think about this, but that thing that you did over there really is counter to what we say we are in our values, right? And we should be able to have a discussion about, not to be accusatory or any of those kind of things, but to be able to. So that's the 360 aspect. It should be of values, that they are, up, down, and vertical and horizontal. Everybody has the right to hold everybody accountable to those.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then also, just sort of as it pertains to all this stuff, one of the traits or characteristics I think we're describing here is empathy too. This ability to actually feel what other people are feeling, or at least care about it, right? And figure out how to build it into our system, make sure that things are sort of adhering to our values, and that we can, be empathetic to their cause. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, but I like the idea of empathy as it pertains to leadership.
I think that good leaders are empathetic. And let me give you an example. I'll talk about myself, and I'll talk about how I got there. I mean, a lot of it's your upbringing, this, that, and the other, but I had some great mentors through the years. And one of the things that I learned pretty early on from a lot of different experiences, mentors, is no matter what you have to do with regard to leading and managing people, sometimes we have to sit down and have hard discussions, okay, that some people call, disciplinary. Sometimes we actually have to relieve people of their positions. That could be for cause, or that could be for lack of work, whatever the case may be. But the cardinal rule is keep them whole. They are human beings, right? And the good leader does that. And I can remember a situation that I had a mentor. We had someone who had a 30-year employee who had made a mistake, had made a life mistake. He had some really big things happen in his life that were not good, big divorce, lost, everything that he had, blah, 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 blah. And he made a mistake, right? He made a bad choice. He made a bad choice and committed, it was minor, but some fraud. And so at any rate, we had to discipline him, and we terminated, we let him retire. We took a little bit of his benefits away, but we pretty much left him intact. But my boss, he worked for me, but my boss did it. He brought me in. I think he knew that I needed that lesson too. And he set this man down. I will never forget it. He set this man down and he said, look, to this gentleman, he said, look, Joe, his name is not Joe, I'm making that one up. And he said, look, Joe, he said, look, I know that you've been through some tough times. I'm really sorry about that. That's really tough. We've all been there and had some tough times. And you've been a great employee. You've done some great things for this company. We really appreciate it. And for the great majority of your career is nothing but stellar contributions, blah, blah, blah. And I'm so sorry, but you made a bad choice here. We can't just overlook that. No, but here's what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. And the guy stood up and shook his hand and thanked him. And my boss looked at me. This was a building that had 3,000 people in it that started pouring out of there at 4:15 every afternoon. And it was about 3:45, and he looked at me. He said, you get him out of here and signed out and out of this building before everybody starts leaving. In other words, he cared about his dignity, and he kept him whole. And that was such an example, and I think that's what good leaders do all the time. We don't denigrate or demean people. We keep them whole even when they've screwed up. I'm not saying that we condone it, and we don't take action, but people are human beings. So I have a lot of people that I've walked out the door through the years. Many of them send me Christmas cards. I have lunch with them. They call me up. I mean, you can still do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that is a great example of showing empathy in the workplace, because I think, and back to our discussion about sort of authenticity and everything else, like if you don't take the time to build those relationships with your employees over the course of your career and over the course of their career, well, then you can't sit down and have that conversation. You cannot empathetically look at this person's career and say, hey, look, I understand where you're coming from. I get that there's problems, but, unfortunately you've made this mistake and it just is what it is. But it's nothing personal. It's,
right.
And so, but, if you don't have a reputation for giving a rip about your people, that conversation is going to come off much more harsh and abrasive.
Absolutely.
Even in my own experience, I mean, I've been laid off 3 times from the same ad agency, who are now my biggest consulting client. And we've been working on and off together for about 10 years now. And it's, but it's all that, right? I mean, I go in, I come to work for them, then I get laid off, and we pat each other on the back and said, okay, well, I'll call you tomorrow for a contract gig, and then we'll keep moving,
Right.
And, so I think it is, I think it's really important. And, I mean, just to sort of solidify your point, I mean, the reason I have that relationship with this particular client is, we built great, authentic relationships. They know me, I know them, we care about one another, and that makes it possible to have that sort of level of connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. Let's kind of change courses here. One of the talking points on your website as well is businesses planning for emergencies. And I think we're right in the middle of a big one right now with COVID and with everything that's going on.
Yep.
How can a business plan for and recover from something like this? I think you refer to it as resurgence planning and convergence planning. Can you maybe break that down for us?
Sure. One of the things that we've done in talking to, clients, colleagues, et cetera, we have a pretty big network, a business network of business owners and so forth, is right now, there's so much uncertainty. I mean, people have to look at, but there's so much uncertainty. So what we've done, instead of just saying we have the big long range, big strategic planning process, and all of that, we've broken it down into what we call these recovery plans. And in the beginning, when this just hit people, I mean, I had clients that lost 80% of their business overnight, just like that, things of that nature. And so what we did is what we called, this emergence plan, and we sat down, and it was really a financial exercise for the most part. Okay, let's look at where things are. What do we have to, look at all the P&L expenses, the balance sheet obligations, okay? Now, and also, did we learn anything? Are there any opportunities? I mean, you've seen businesses that have shifted. We've got one here locally, one of my clients that's in the plastics business that shifted to making these face shields, all right? They had the equipment, to be able to do that. And these plexiglass, and everybody's putting these plexiglass dividers up, in banks and tellers and, grocery stores and all of that, and they can make those things. So that's what we're looking at. And it's a 6-month plan, Mike. It's not a 12-month plan, and it's not terribly strategic. It's like a survival plan. And then so if you make it through that 6 months, then we do a 6-month plan on resurgence. Okay, so now we've gotten there. We survived, we made it. So what's the next 6 months look like? And so we bring some more things in there, okay, in terms of some internal and some external assessments. And we do another 6 months plan. And then what we believe is going to happen, you don't know exactly when, but either the future's going to become clear what the new reality is, or we're just going to decide what it is. That's what business leaders are going to have to do for their businesses. And so that starts converging and coming together. And that's another 6-month plan that gets a little more strategic. So we're saying for the next 18 months, it's these small bites, take that 6-month look. And the way we're managing that is through triggers, through metrics, such that, so for example, let's say as a business, I say, the only thing that's important for the next 6 months is that I have enough cash to pay my bills. That may be your metric. So that is the thing that we're looking at. If it's looking like that next month I'm not going to be able, what adjustments do I have to make? And volume's driving everything. Okay, is this much business coming back so that I can, have this kind of expenditure? I mean, it's pretty elementary, but the plan is in place and the trigger. So that's the way you deal with that you can flex it. The next 6 months, you may be able to put another couple of metrics in there, KPIs, so to speak, to measure things. But that's the way we're doing it. And we're taking it in smaller bites that are a little bit more pragmatic, a little bit more tactical.
Yeah, I think one of the things I like about that so much is sort of the peace of mind that comes from having a plan at all. Exactly. The world is in this crazy state of upheaval. And for a lot of businesses, like you said, they're really suffering. And so it can feel a little chaotic and a little out there. And if you're trying to stick to old plans, back to our earlier metaphor with the roadmap, if you're trying to stick to those old plans, well, they're just not applicable anymore. There are too many road hazards in the way for us to make our trip right now. And so, so I love the idea of that. And then also just sort of the idea of bringing some normalcy, even despite craziness, right? So, I mean, we're developing, what at least can be stable and steady, for the well-being of our clients and for the well-being of ourselves as we're trying to run our businesses and things. I mean, it makes an awful lot of sense to do something like that. So I love that you're doing it.
Yeah, I like the pivoting point that you brought up, how your client, went from making X to making B, just something completely different that fits into what they can do. There's a distillery company up in Park City close to us that went from making, vodka to making hand sanitizer because they were set up for that. And I really think that kind of shows, that being able to pivot in a time of, something like this is critical. Absolutely. And we all kind of need to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, and so maybe as an extension of that conversation and actually an extension of everything we've been talking about, I wanted to talk about your personality specifically. And one of the things that you're sort of known for is this idea of straight talk. And the way that you talk to people isn't real fluffy and you're really, pushing people down the road. And I'm sure you've got a handful of entrepreneurs that like that and a handful that don't. But I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about your approach and sort of the importance of stripping away some of the fluff and just kind of getting down to business.
You know, here's the thing. People sometimes don't like it at first, Brian, okay? Because it kind of hurts maybe, or, you know, they don't know me well enough. But one of the things that approach really works so well is that we really do care about the best interest of our clients. And it doesn't take them too long to understand that. And they know that when I talk tough to them, I'm doing it because I care about their business. And the thing that opens up is to be able to have tough conversations that they need, right? And if you can't have that, but you can't get there unless they totally trust you and they know that you have their best interest at heart. And then they do know that I'm going to tell them the truth, and they pay attention to that. So it's a real plus. It's an interesting thing. My former business partner, one of the best partnerships probably of all time that he and I had. We're still great friends. He's just, you know, like I said, much older than I am, so he retired. But, you know, he was a softer kind of guy, had a different approach that worked for him. There's nobody in the world that ever would accuse him of being harsh or tough or any of that kind of stuff. Not being firm or authentic, but, you know, a different style. But at the end of the day, the clients were stickier to me over time, okay? Because I didn't cut them any slack when I thought that they were doing things that wasn't good for them or for the business. And that's where it works, but always out of the place of being in their best interest. And again, never demeaning them, okay? Straight talk, but never demeaning them. And that's what's important. You know, when I left the corporate world, my boss that I had worked for a long time, and I was his, you know, we worked very closely together, and he came in and we had a great conversation, and he said all kinds of nice things to me about my career and this, that, and the other. I know that. I remember that. It was pleasant. I don't remember any specific he said except one thing. And he said to me, "You always told me the hard truths." That was the best thing he said to me. And he said that was the most valuable thing that I ever did. And my clients tell me that over and over again. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's true. I think so many of us, you know, actually need it, even if we don't want it.
Right.
And, you know, the example I always use is my wife is a junior high teacher, teaches 8th and 9th grade honors English. And you know, she's got kind of a reputation for being kind of the tough teacher, right? You know, she has really high expectations. I mean, you know, in the theme of our conversation, she has honesty and integrity tattooed on her wrists. Like, she's not messing around. And so, you know, so she holds a really high standard for those kids. And, you know, in the short view, you know, if you really look at like the day-to-day interactions, it might come off like, oh man, she's so tough. You know, why is she being like that or whatever, you know, but like you're saying, it comes from a place of, you know, actually caring and wanting these kids to excel. And so what ends up happening is, even, you know, up to today, I mean, she's getting, you know, graduation announcements and wedding invites and everything from kids that she taught 10 years ago. Exactly. You know, who are now coming back to her because her class was so impactful for their lives. Exactly. You know, and you know, I mean, sure, in the short moment, it's great to have that nice teacher that's cool and just kind of lets you do what you want to do. But in the long run, what you really need is someone to sort of help set you straight. And I think people who offer that guidance along the way are really critical. So I appreciate that about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do find that to be the case.
Yeah, I think it's critical that you have someone who's there for you like that can actually, you know, sit back and tell you, hey man, you're screwing up. You need to do this. This is what's wrong. This is why it's wrong, and not sugarcoat it, because if they sugarcoat it and they just try and appease you, it's not there's no accountability there, and there's no forward progression coming from there. So
and doing that from this authentic place just to go full circle. You know, not just that we're being hard on you, but we're being hard on you because we care.
Not doing it just to be a tough person.
Yeah, I love that. So one last thing, or, you know, as we're starting to wind down here, starting to get towards the end, I wanted to talk to you about one thing. And, you know, honestly, we've touched on it quite a bit throughout, but I'd like to sort of bring that theme home a little bit, was this idea about a mission of service. I read this in some of your bio information and some other things, this idea of being a service-based company and living sort of a life of, wanting to offer service to others. And I wondered if you'd sort of talk about that. And this goes back to our authenticity conversation and some other things like that. But, again, so many people say it, but not that many people live it. And it's this idea of being sort of selfless and giving unto others. It's also this idea of, sort of flexing high level emotional intelligence and understanding, the needs of those around you. And I wonder if you'd just sort of talk about, on maybe the management side, maybe the personal side, wherever it best fits, just sort of the ideas, or how you've taken and cultivated these soft skills in your career and in your life, and how you've sort of leveraged those to find success in business, And like I say, I realize we've touched on this sort of throughout the conversation, but I'd like to just maybe put a little bow on it.
Well, for me, I think I'm probably a really great person for you to ask this question of, because I'm not particularly a warm and fuzzy person, right? I'm not, and I get that, and people would say that. I'm not, so that's true. But I do have the skill set, and I do care about people a lot, and I care about making a difference a lot. So I have a skill set of being able to lead and being able to influence. And so for me, the way that I get that feeling of gratification is using those skills to make a difference in a lot of places, in a lot of different, in people's lives in different ways, okay, than some people. But for me, at the end of the day, the thing that jazzes me most in life is when I've helped someone else to move forward, to accomplish, okay, and to do it authentically, okay, and on their own. Not that I gave it to them, that they learned for themselves, that they accomplished something, or we did accomplish something big. So that goes down from coaching an individual to helping a business and an organization, to just recently we had a big zoning issue in my community, and it was really gratifying that people in my community came to my door and said, you know what, Kathy, we need you to take the lead on this. You are the bulldog that will get hold of this and make it work out. And you know what? Everybody that we talked to outside of that, lawyers and all different, we availed ourselves to every resource, correct? I would leave no stone unturned. Oh, this is an uphill battle. You can't win this battle. You're never going to win it. Guess what? We not only won it, we defeated that zoning unanimously. And you know how we did it? Yes, I led the cause, but I mobilized our neighbors and our neighborhoods in that area and got homeowners to write authentic letters, personal letters. People would say to me, do you have a template that you can give me that I can just fill it out? I'm like, no, here's some talking points. Here are the key points that, the issues, but you write it from your heart, from your family. And when those aldermen, those politicians got together with the last vote, every one of them said, we have never had this much feedback. We've never had this many authentic letters. These were not form letters. They specifically cited that. That made me feel great. And, and when people said, oh, you did this, I didn't do it. Yes, I led the effort. But that was really gratifying to me, that we did something to save our community, because this would have destroyed our community. And, and that everybody, we were able to engage everybody. And I bet you can even tell by listening to me talk about this, that I'm very animated about it. So I think that for me, every time I see someone in a coaching session get something, move forward, a business, or that kind of example, that's what I can do, and that's what really gets me jazzed. I mean, yeah, I love closing a big sale, but at the end of the day, and yes, I'm in this to make a living, and if people didn't pay me, I wouldn't show up, to be sure, but nonetheless, that's the thing that really gets me jazzed. And the truth of the matter is, everybody does everything for what's in it for them, but so that gratification is what's in it for me, and I find that to be true for a lot of people.
Yeah, I love that. Well, cool. So as we're kind of coming to the end of this thing, where can people find out more about your company, the Lattitude Group, and, about you personally, maybe get connected or reach out if they'd like to, and, learn more about the work you're doing?
It's real simple. We've made it pretty easy. You can go to www.latitudegroup.com. Everything in terms of getting in touch with us, information about the business, about myself, other members of the organization, schedule a consultation, which is free. And we also now have a landing page that talks about these recovery plans, where you can get to a guide of things that business owners should be asking themselves right now. That question you asked me earlier about what are some of the things that people should be looking at or to tell them they need to be doing. We put together a guide, and you go to golatitude.com and you can get that and get to that guide. So everything is either right off of there or off of that landing page.
So before we let you go, I was listening to another podcast you were on, and you were talking about the name Latitude and how you came up with it, and you referred to it as attitude and something else. Can you break that down? Just tell us a little bit about the name and why you came with Latitude Group.
Well, our Latitude has 3 T's in it, which means that we have attitude in our latitude. So we're about attitude, to be sure, which makes a huge difference, right, in terms of how we conduct ourselves, the motivations, etc. And we're also about direction. So the Latitude's about direction, but it also, we can be going in the right direction with the wrong attitude and not get the right results.
I like that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, cool. Thank you so much, Kathy. We really appreciate your time. Grateful that you were able to meet with us today. And yeah, everybody check out the website and all that good stuff. We'll make sure it's all included in the show notes.
Thank you, guys. It was a real pleasure.
Absolutely.
Not a problem.
And thanks to everybody who listened this week and every week, and we'll see you all next time.